The wedding invitation arrived in a crimson envelope, Marcus's elegant handwriting mocking her from expensive cardstock. 6 months after he'd shattered her heart for a socialite's fortune, he wanted Elena to watch him say, "I do." She should burn it. She should forget him. Instead, she made a deal with the most dangerous man in the city, a stranger whose dark eyes promised both salvation and ruin. Lorenzo DeLuca didn't just offer to escort her to that wedding. He offered to rewrite her entire story. But power always has a price, and Elena was about to learn exactly what hers would be. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far Elena's journey reaches across the world. The diner's neon sign flickered against the rain-slicked windows, casting pink and blue shadows across the empty booths. Elena Carter wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, her movements automatic, her mind anywhere but the present. The clock read 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until her shift ended. 13 minutes until she could go home to her cramped studio apartment and pretend she wasn't drowning. The crimson envelope sat in her purse like a live coal, burning through leather and lining straight into her chest. Marcus and Vivian request the honor of your presence. She'd read those words so many times the elegant script had burned into her retinas. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, she was supposed to watch the man she'd loved for 4 years marry someone else. Someone richer, someone better connected, someone who hadn't wasted her 20s working double shifts while he built his career on her unwavering support. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Elena from her thoughts. She looked up, ready to deliver her practiced smile, but the words died on her lips. The man who entered didn't belong in Eddie's all-night diner. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from the perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her annual rent, to the way he moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Dark as midnight, sharp as broken glass, missing nothing. Those eyes found hers across the empty diner and held. "We're about to close," Elena said, hating how her voice wavered. She cleared her throat. "But I can get you something quick if—" "Coffee. Black." His voice was deep, textured with an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. He slid onto a stool directly in front of her, those penetrating eyes never leaving her face. "And whatever's troubling you." Elena's hand froze on the coffee pot. "Excuse me?" "You've wiped that same spot on the counter 17 times in the last 2 minutes." He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. "Either you have obsessive-compulsive tendencies, or something's eating at you. Given the redness around your eyes, and the way you keep glancing at your purse, I'd guess the latter." Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. That's really none of your business." "No," he agreed, accepting the coffee cup she set down with more force than necessary. "But I'm making it my business. Call it curiosity. Call it a slow night. Call it whatever you like." He took a sip, maintaining eye contact. "You're in pain. I can see it from across the room. So tell me, what bastard broke your heart?" The question, asked so bluntly by a complete stranger, should have offended her, should have made her throw him out despite the expensive suit and the dangerous air of authority that clung to him like cologne. Instead, something inside her cracked. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, really looked at her, not through her the way most people did. Maybe it was simply that she'd been holding everything in for so long that the pressure had finally exceeded her capacity to contain it. "His name is Marcus," she heard herself say. "And he didn't just break my heart. Her voice caught. She gripped the edge of the counter, steadying herself. "He calculated exactly how much he could take from me before trading up." The stranger's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Interest, perhaps, or recognition. "Tell me," he said simply. And Elena did. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. She told him about meeting Marcus in college, about how he'd been charming and ambitious, full of dreams about the future they'd build together. She told him about the years she'd worked herself to exhaustion, paying their rent while he finished law school, believing in him when his own family had written him off. She told him about the small ways she'd sacrificed, the art classes she'd abandoned, the career opportunities she'd declined because they would have required moving away from his internship, his networking events, his carefully constructed path to success. "I thought we were a team," Elena said, her knuckles white around the coffee pot she'd forgotten she was holding. "I thought I was investing in our future." But the moment he made partner at Crawford and Associates, the moment he started mingling with the old money crowd, she laughed, a broken sound. "I became an inconvenience, a reminder of where he came from, someone who didn't fit the image he was trying to project. So he left you." The stranger's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it now, something cold and sharp. 3 weeks before our 5th anniversary. Elena set down the coffee pot before she could drop it. No explanation, no conversation, just a text message saying it wasn't working anymore. I came home from a double shift and half his things were already gone. The next day, his Facebook status said, "In a relationship." 2 weeks after that, I saw the engagement announcement in the society pages. Vivian Ashford, daughter of Judge Ashford, granddaughter of the Ashford real estate empire. Everything I could never be. And the invitation? Elena's hand moved involuntarily to her purse. Arrived yesterday. Crimson envelope, gold lettering, Marcus's handwriting on the address. He wants me there. Front and center. Watching him marry someone better. Why would he do that? To prove he won. The words tasted like ash. To make absolutely certain I know my place. Or maybe... She met the stranger's eyes, surprised by the understanding she found there. Maybe he wants to erase any guilt he might feel by confirming I'm fine, that I've moved on, that our years together were just a stepping stone for both of us, not just him. Silence settled between them, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of rain against the windows. The stranger drank his coffee slowly, methodically, his gaze never leaving Elena's face. She should feel uncomfortable under such intense scrutiny. Instead, she felt seen in a way she hadn't experienced in months, maybe years. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Elena. Elena Carter." "Elena?" He said it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. "Beautiful name. Strong. It suits you better than you realize." He set down his cup with deliberate precision. "I'm Lorenzo DeLuca." The name meant nothing to Elena, but she saw something flicker across his face when she didn't react. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. "Well, Elena Carter, you have a decision to make." Lorenzo leaned forward slightly, his attention absolute and unwavering. "You can throw away that invitation, nurse your wounds, and let Marcus Hale believe he broke you. Or," he paused, letting the word hang in the air between them, "you can walk into that wedding on the arm of someone who makes him realize exactly what he threw away. Someone who makes everyone in that room question whether he made the biggest mistake of his life." Elena's heart stuttered. "I don't have anyone like that. I don't—" "You do now." Lorenzo's smile was slight but devastating. "If you want." "I don't understand." Elena shook her head, trying to clear the fog of confusion. "You don't even know me. Why would you—" "Let's just say I have a particular distaste for men who use people as stepping stones." Something dark moved behind Lorenzo's eyes, there and gone in an instant. "And I have a weakness for helping people reclaim their power from those who stole it." "This is insane." Elena laughed, but it came out breathless. "You're a complete stranger. I can't just—" "Can't you?" Lorenzo stood, pulling a card from his inside jacket pocket. He placed it on the counter between them, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm. "My number. Call me tomorrow, after you've had time to think. If you decide you want to walk into that wedding with your head held high, with every person in that room wondering how Marcus could have been stupid enough to let you go, call me. I'll make it happen." Elena stared at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, a phone number, and nothing else. No company name, no title, just Lorenzo DeLuca and 10 digits that felt like a doorway to another world. "And if I don't call?" "Then you don't call." Lorenzo's shrug was elegant, unconcerned. "You go back to wiping down this counter, Marcus marries his socialite, and life continues exactly as it has been. Safe, predictable, small." He buttoned his suit jacket with practiced ease. "But somehow, Elena, I don't think you want small anymore. I think you're tired of making yourself invisible so other people can shine." He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her over his shoulder. 3 weeks, he said. That's not much time to transform a life, but I've done more with less. His smile was sharp enough to cut. The question is, are you brave enough to let me? The bell chimed as he left, and suddenly the diner felt impossibly empty. Elena looked down at the card in her hand, then at the crimson envelope peeking out of her purse. She didn't sleep that night. The morning came too bright, too loud, too real. Elena sat at her kitchen table, really a folding card table with a chipped corner, staring at Lorenzo's business card. In the harsh light of day, last night felt like a fever dream. Mysterious stranger appears, offers to escort her to her ex's wedding, promises to make her the center of attention. Things like that didn't happen in real life, especially not to broke waitresses living in studio apartments where the radiator clanked and the neighbors screamed at all hours. She had to work the lunch shift. She had bills to pay. She had a life, small as it was, that didn't include mysterious men in $1,000 suits making impossible offers. Elena picked up the card, intending to throw it away. Instead, she found herself dialing. He answered on the second ring. Elena. No hello, no questioning lilt. Just her name, spoken like he'd been expecting her call, like he knew she wouldn't be able to resist. This is crazy, she said. Yes. Lorenzo's voice was warm with amusement. But you called anyway. I don't know why. I do. She could hear the smile in his voice. You're exhausted from being underestimated. You're furious that someone took the best years of your loyalty and traded them for social status. And somewhere beneath the hurt and the anger, you're curious about who you could be if someone actually invested in you the way you've invested in everyone else. Elena closed her eyes. You don't know me well enough to... I know enough. I know you've been making yourself smaller for years, dimming your light so Marcus could shine brighter. I know you gave up your dreams, art, wasn't it, to fund his. I know you're terrified that maybe he was right. Maybe you are just the girl from nowhere, destined to stay there. Stop, her voice cracked. No. Because here's what Marcus doesn't know, what you've forgotten. You were never small, Elena. You were just surrounded by people too threatened by your potential to let you bloom. Lorenzo's tone shifted, became businesslike. I'm sending a car to your address in 1 hour. It will bring you to me. We have 3 weeks to prepare, and I don't waste time. Prepare for what exactly? For war, Elena. Beautiful, devastating, absolutely unforgivable war. The satisfaction in his voice was palpable. Marcus wanted you at his wedding to prove his superiority. Instead, you're going to walk in there and prove something far more important, that he never deserved you in the first place. I have to work. I can't just... You're taking a 3-week leave of absence, paid. Before she could protest, Lorenzo continued. I've already arranged it with your manager. Eddie sends his regards and says to knock 'em dead, whatever that means. Elena's mouth fell open. How did you... I'm very thorough, Elena. It served me well over the years. Papers rustled in the background. The car will arrive at 10 a.m. Wear something comfortable. We have a lot of work to do. Lorenzo, I can't let you... You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to help you because it suits me to do so. Because men like Marcus Hale disgust me. Because I see potential in you that he was too blind and selfish to nurture. His voice softened slightly. And because I think you deserve to know what it feels like to be someone's priority instead of their stepping stone. The line went dead. Elena sat in her kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, heart hammering against her ribs. This was insane. This was reckless. This was the most alive she'd felt in 6 months. She looked at the clock. 9:07 a.m. 53 minutes until the car arrived. 53 minutes to decide if she was brave enough to step through the door Lorenzo had opened. Elena stood, walked to her closet, and started getting ready. The car was a black Mercedes S-Class with windows tinted dark enough to hide secrets. The driver, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, introduced himself as Thomas and said nothing else during the 30-minute drive through the city. Elena watched familiar streets give way to unfamiliar ones. Warehouses and apartment buildings replaced by tree-lined avenues and buildings that wore their history like expensive jewelry. They pulled up to a building that looked like it had been transplanted from a European capital, all stone facade and wrought iron balconies, elegant and imposing. Thomas opened her door, gave her an encouraging nod, and gestured to the entrance where a doorman waited. "Ms. Carter," the doorman said, as if her arrival was not only expected but significant. "Mr. DeLuca is waiting for you in the penthouse, top floor." The elevator was all mirrors and dark wood, rising so smoothly Elena barely felt the movement. When the doors opened, they revealed not a hallway but a private foyer with a single door, already open. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, somehow even more imposing than he'd been in the diner. He'd traded the suit for dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with what looked like old scars. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and the effect was somehow more dangerous than the polished perfection of last night. "You came," he said. "I'm probably insane." "Probably." Lorenzo stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "But sanity is overrated, especially when seeking revenge." "I'm not—" Elena stopped, caught by the view. Lorenzo's apartment was massive, all floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furnishings that managed to be both luxurious and comfortable, art on the walls that even her untrained eye recognized as valuable. "This isn't about revenge." "Isn't it?" Lorenzo moved to a bar cart, poured 2 glasses of what looked like expensive scotch, even though it wasn't yet 11 in the morning. He handed her one. "Then what is it about?" Elena took the glass, stared into the amber liquid. "Proving I'm not broken." "Ah." Lorenzo touched his glass to hers, the crystal singing. "That's just revenge by another name. Healthier, perhaps. More honest. But revenge nonetheless." He took a sip, watching her over the rim. "And there's nothing wrong with that. Marcus broke something in you. I'm going to help you rebuild it into something he can't touch." "Why?" The question burst out of her. "You still haven't explained why you're doing this. What do you get out of it?" Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, focused on something only he could see. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it yet. 5 years ago, someone I cared about very much was destroyed by a man not unlike Marcus. Someone who used her, drained her of everything valuable, and discarded her when someone better came along." His jaw tightened. "I was too late to help her. By the time I understood what was happening, she'd already—" He stopped, shook his head. "Let's just say she couldn't find her way back to herself." "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "Don't be. Just let me help you. Consider it penance, if you like. Or opportunity. Or simply a wealthy man's whim." Lorenzo set down his glass with decisive precision. "The why doesn't matter as much as the what. And what I'm offering is this: 3 weeks of my time, my resources, and my expertise to transform you into someone Marcus will regret losing for the rest of his privileged life." Elena should walk away. Every rational instinct screamed that this was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But when she looked at Lorenzo, really looked at him, she saw something beyond the wealth and the power. She saw recognition, someone who understood what it meant to be underestimated. Someone who knew the particular rage of watching people you'd helped forget you existed. "What do I have to do?" she asked. Lorenzo's smile was sharp and satisfied. "Everything I say, exactly as I say it. For 3 weeks, you trust me completely. You don't question, you don't hesitate, you don't second guess." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her pulse quicken. "I'm going to rebuild you, Elena. Not change you. The foundation is already perfect. But we're going to strip away all the apologizing, all the self-doubt, all the ways you've learned to make yourself small. When we're done, you'll walk into that wedding like you own it, because you will." Do you trust me?" It was an insane question. She'd known him less than 24 hours. She knew nothing about him except that he was wealthy, perceptive, and apparently had the power to arrange leave from her job with a phone call. Trusting him was absurd. "Yes," Elena heard herself say. "Good." Lorenzo pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "We start now. I've arranged for a full team to meet us here. Stylist, personal shopper, image consultant. By tonight, you'll look like someone Marcus would have to mortgage his soul to afford. By the end of the week, you'll carry yourself like you know it, and by the time we walk into that wedding, you'll believe it." "Lorenzo, this is too much. I can't—" "Stop. His voice was sharp but not unkind. That's the first thing we're eliminating. I can't. It's too much. I don't deserve this. Every self-deprecating phrase you've used as armor for years, they're gone. Starting now, you speak about yourself the way I see you, as someone valuable, powerful, worth investing in. Elena opened her mouth to protest, caught herself, closed it again. Lorenzo noticed and nodded approvingly. Quick learner, I like that. He gestured to the sofa. Sit. Tell me about the wedding. Every detail you know. Guest list, venue, schedule, anything Marcus might have mentioned before he became the world's biggest fool. As Elena settled onto the luxurious sofa and began describing what she knew about Marcus's upcoming nuptials, she felt something unfamiliar unfurling in her chest. Not quite hope. That felt too fragile, too easily crushed, but something close to it, something that felt like possibility. Lorenzo listened with absolute attention, asking pointed questions, making notes on his phone, building what Elena realized was a strategy. He approached her revenge, because that's what this was, regardless of what she wanted to call it, like a military campaign. Every detail mattered. Every advantage would be leveraged. The reception is at the Grandview Estate, Elena said. Marcus always wanted to get married there, said it was where all the important people held their events. It is. Lorenzo's expression was unreadable. I know the owner well. Consider that handled. What do you mean handled? I mean that by the time we arrive, every person of consequence at that wedding will know exactly who I am. And when they see you with me, Lorenzo leaned back, supremely confident. Marcus will understand he didn't just lose you. He lost his chance at the only real thing he'll ever have. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lorenzo rose smoothly, answering it to reveal 4 people carrying garment bags, equipment cases, and portfolios. They entered with the efficiency of a practice team, barely pausing before transforming Lorenzo's living room into what looked like a high-end salon. Elena, Lorenzo said, gesturing to a woman with sharp features and kind eyes. This is Simone. She's going to handle your styling. Simone, this is Elena Carter. She's going to a wedding in 3 weeks and needs to look like she could buy and sell the groom before breakfast. Simone's smile was fierce. I love this kind of challenge. For the next 6 hours, Elena was measured, photographed, questioned, and analyzed. Simone asked about her coloring, her preferences, her lifestyle. A man named Julian examined her hair, talking about angles and highlights and bone structure while running his fingers through her admittedly neglected locks. A woman called herself simply V studied Elena's skin, her face, her features, murmuring about enhancement versus transformation. Through it all, Lorenzo watched, occasionally offering input, but mostly observing with those dark, penetrating eyes. Elena should have felt self-conscious. Instead, she felt seen. Really, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in years. She has excellent bone structure, Julian said, tilting Elena's face toward the light. Hidden under this style, but excellent. High cheekbones, strong jaw. We can work with this. Her coloring is extraordinary, V added, mixing something in a small palette. That skin tone, those eyes. She's been hiding herself, deliberately, I think. Not hiding, Lorenzo said quietly. Dimming. There's a difference. Elena met his eyes across the room. Something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. He did see her, saw exactly what she had been doing, how she'd learned to make herself less threatening, less vibrant, less everything so that Marcus could shine brighter, no more. What do you want? Simone asked, settling beside Elena on the sofa. Not what Marcus wanted, not what anyone else thinks you should be. What do you want to look like when you walk into that wedding? Elena thought about it, really thought about it. I want to look like someone who never needed him, someone who was always this valuable, this powerful, someone he was lucky to have, not the other way around. Simone's smile widened. Perfect. Give me 3 weeks and I'll make sure everyone in that room knows it. The day blurred into evening. Garment bags accumulated, each containing pieces Simone promised would change her life. Julian scheduled her for appointments throughout the coming weeks, talking about color and cut and bringing out her natural beauty. V sent her home with a skincare routine that included more steps than Elena knew existed. As the team packed up to leave, Lorenzo walked Elena to the elevator. Tomorrow, he said. We start the real work. Posture, presence, how you move through a room, how to make people see you the way I see you. And how's that? Elena asked, surprised by her own boldness. Lorenzo studied her face, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain, like someone worth going to war for. The elevator doors closed on his words, and Elena rode down alone, her reflection multiplying in the mirrors. For the first time in 6 months, she looked at herself and saw potential instead of failure. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lorenzo. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we begin transforming potential into power. Elena smiled. Then she texted back, I'm ready. And for the first time since Marcus had walked out of her life, she meant it. The next morning arrived with Thomas at her door at precisely 7 a.m., holding a coffee that probably cost more than her usual breakfast, and looking completely unsurprised when Elena answered in the outfit Simone had left for her, tailored black pants that actually fit, a cream silk blouse that felt like water against her skin, and shoes that somehow made her stand taller without the torture of stilettos. Mr. DeLuca is expecting you, Thomas said, his tone suggesting this early morning pickup would become routine. Elena had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lorenzo's face, heard his voice promising to transform her into someone Marcus would regret losing. Part of her still couldn't believe this was happening. The other part, the part that had watched Marcus walk away without a backward glance, was ready to burn down the world. The penthouse looked different in morning light, less intimidating somehow. Lorenzo stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian to someone who seemed to be protesting whatever he was saying. He gestured sharply, cutting off the conversation, then noticed Elena and smiled. Punctual, he said, pocketing his phone. I appreciate that. Marcus was always late, wasn't he? Elena blinked, surprised. How did you? You mentioned it yesterday. Said he kept you waiting at restaurants, parties, your own birthday dinner? Lorenzo crossed to her, studying her with the same intensity he'd shown in the diner. People who are chronically late are sending a message. Their time is more valuable than yours. We're going to teach you that your time is priceless. He led her to the dining area where breakfast waited. Fresh fruit, perfectly cooked eggs, bread that smelled like it had been baked that morning. Elena's usual breakfast was coffee and whatever she could grab between shifts. Eat, Lorenzo said, pouring her coffee from a French press. You'll need your strength. Today we work on presence. Presence? How you enter a room, how you hold yourself. The difference between apologizing for existing and commanding attention. He settled across from her, his own plate barely touched. Right now you move through the world like you're trying not to be noticed. We're going to reverse that. Elena took a bite of eggs, perfectly seasoned, and almost moaned. I don't know if I can... She caught herself, remembering his rule. I mean, I've never been good at being the center of attention. That's because you were taught it was safer to be invisible. Growing up, was it better to be noticed or overlooked? The question landed like a punch. Elena set down her fork, memories flooding back. Overlooked. My mom worked 3 jobs. My dad left when I was 6. Being noticed usually meant being a burden. So you learn to be small, to need less, to take up less space. Lorenzo's voice was gentle but firm. And Marcus exploited that. He needed someone who wouldn't challenge him, who'd support his ambitions without developing her own. You were perfect for him precisely because you'd been trained not to shine. That's not... Elena stopped, the protest dying in her throat. Because it was true. She'd chosen Marcus partly because he'd seemed so confident, so sure of his path, and she'd had no idea what hers should be. Supporting him had felt easier than figuring out her own dreams. I'm not judging, Lorenzo said. I'm identifying the pattern so we can break it. By the time we walk into that wedding, you won't just look different. You'll carry yourself differently. Move differently. When you enter a room, people will notice, and you'll let them. After breakfast, Lorenzo transformed the spacious living room into a training ground. He moved furniture aside, creating a clear path from one end to the other. Walk to the windows, he said. Elena did, self-conscious under his scrutiny. Again, but this time, imagine you own everything in this room. The art on the walls, the view, the very air. Walk like someone who's never questioned her right to be exactly where she is. Elena tried. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, attempted confidence she didn't feel. "You're faking it," Lorenzo said. "I can see it from here. You're performing confidence instead of embodying it." "I don't know how to embody something I don't feel." Lorenzo stood, crossing to her in 3 fluid strides. "Then we start with the body and let the feeling follow. Shoulders back. Not thrown back like you're bracing for impact, but settled back naturally." His hands touched her shoulders, adjusting her posture with surprising gentleness. Spine straight, but not rigid. "You're not a soldier at attention, you're a woman who knows her worth." His touch sent heat racing through her. Elena fought to focus on his words instead of the way her skin seemed to wake up everywhere his fingers brushed. Chin level, not up. Looking down on people is arrogance. Looking them straight in the eye is power. He stepped around her, checking her posture from every angle. "Now walk, slowly. Every step deliberate. You're not rushing to get somewhere. You're allowing the destination to wait for you." Elena walked. It felt unnatural, too slow, too exposed. "Better," Lorenzo said. "Again. This time, imagine everyone in that wedding is already watching you enter. Marcus sees you first. What do you want him to see?" Elena paused, really considering the question. What did she want Marcus to see? Not someone broken by his leaving, not someone desperate to prove she'd moved on, someone who'd always been too good for him and had finally realized it. She walked again, and this time something shifted. Her steps became more measured, more certain. Her spine straightened not from effort, but from an unfamiliar sense of self-possession. "Yes," Lorenzo said, satisfaction clear in his voice. "That's it. Do you feel the difference?" Elena did. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A slight shift in how she inhabited her own body and how much space she allowed herself to take up. Now we practice until it's natural, until you don't have to think about it, until this is simply how you move. For the next 2 hours, Elena walked, back and forth across Lorenzo's living room, adjusting her posture, her pace, the set of her shoulders under his watchful eye. He was exacting but never cruel, correcting her gently but firmly, pushing her past the discomfort of being seen. "Tell me about your art," he said during a brief break. The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Last night you mentioned giving up art classes for Marcus. What kind of art?" Elena felt heat creep up her neck. "It was nothing, just something I did in college." "If it was nothing, you wouldn't have mentioned it." "What kind?" "Painting, mostly, some sketching. I had a professor who said I had potential, who wanted me to apply for a competitive program. But Marcus needed—" She stopped herself. "I chose to support Marcus instead." "Show me." Lorenzo gestured to a cabinet, opened it to reveal art supplies, professional grade pencils, sketchbooks, charcoals. "Draw something, now." "I haven't drawn in 4 years." "Then you're overdue." He handed her a sketchbook and pencil. "Don't think, just draw whatever comes." Elena's hands moved almost without conscious thought. Lines appeared on paper, the view from Lorenzo's windows, the city stretching out below, but not exactly as it was. Transformed somehow, darker and more romantic. The buildings like guardians watching over secrets. She lost herself in it, the way she used to in college. The rest of the world faded until there was just the scratch of pencil on paper, the image emerging from nothing, her hand remembering skills she'd thought were lost. When she finally looked up, Lorenzo was standing beside her, studying the sketch with an expression she couldn't read. "You said you gave this up?" His voice was quiet, almost angry. "It wasn't practical. Marcus needed you to be less than you were so he could feel bigger than he was." Lorenzo took the sketchbook, examining her work closely. "This is extraordinary, Elena. This isn't a hobby you abandoned. This is a gift you buried." Elena's throat tightened. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters completely. Marcus didn't just take your time and your loyalty. He took your voice, your way of seeing the world." Lorenzo set down the sketchbook, his dark eyes intense. "Getting you ready for that wedding isn't just about making you look different. It's about excavating everything he convinced you to hide, starting with this." He pulled out his phone, made a call. "Simone?" I need you to add something to Elena's wardrobe. Something artistic, creative. She's a painter. He listened, nodded. Yes, I'm sure. Also, contact Michaela Chen at the Rivera Gallery. Tell her I have an artist she needs to meet. Lorenzo, you can't, Elena started. He held up a hand, finishing the call. I can and I am. You're going to start painting again, not someday, now, today. He gestured to the supplies. Consider this part of your training. 1 hour every day you create something. Anything. No judgment. No pressure. Just remembering who you were before someone convinced you to be smaller. Elena stared at him, emotions churning in her chest. Why does this matter to you so much? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. Because I know what it's like to hide who you are to survive. To bury parts of yourself so deep you forget they existed. He met her eyes. The difference is, I got them back. You will too. The afternoon brought new challenges. A woman named Victoria arrived, impeccably dressed and radiating the kind of confidence Elena was trying to learn. Lorenzo introduced her as a communications coach. She's going to teach you how to own a conversation, he explained, how to deflect, redirect, and dominate discourse without anyone realizing you're doing it. Victoria's smile was sharp. Think of it as social combat. Every conversation is a negotiation. Right now, you negotiate from a position of weakness. We're going to change that. For hours, Victoria drilled her on conversation techniques. How to answer questions without really answering them. How to redirect attention back to your interrogator. How to make someone else feel exposed while revealing nothing about yourself. Marcus will try to talk to you at the wedding, Victoria said. Probably try to pull you aside, explain himself, maybe even apologize. What do you say? Elena considered. That I've moved on? Boring, defensive, implies he still has power to hurt you. Victoria circled her like a predator. Try this instead. I appreciate you thinking of me, Marcus, but Lorenzo and I have other obligations tonight. I hope you and Vivian are very happy. Then you walk away. No lingering, no waiting for his response. You've dismissed him. That seems cold. That seems powerful, Lorenzo corrected from where he watched by the windows. You're not being cruel. You're being indifferent. And indifference is the opposite of love, not hate. It says he no longer matters enough to hurt you. They practiced scenarios until Elena's head spun. What to say to Marcus's mother, who'd always looked down on her. How to handle Vivian if she tried to be condescending. What to do if someone asked about her relationship with Lorenzo. You tell them the truth, Lorenzo said. That we're together. That I'm fortunate to have you. Let them wonder about the details. But we're not really, Elena started, then stopped, realizing the complexity of what they were doing. What are we exactly? Lorenzo's expression was unreadable. We're partners in a very specific mission. What happens after the wedding? He shrugged. We'll see. For now, focus on the mission. It should have bothered her, the ambiguity. Instead, Elena felt oddly relieved. This wasn't about romance or real relationships. This was about reclaiming herself. Anything else would complicate that. As evening fell, Victoria departed with a promise to return later in the week. Lorenzo ordered dinner from a restaurant that apparently didn't have a public phone number, and they ate on his terrace overlooking the city. You did well today, Lorenzo said, pouring wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Better than I expected. I feel like my brain is full, Elena admitted, like I'm learning a new language. You are, the language of power. It's different from what you've spoken your whole life. He studied her over his wine glass. Tell me something. When Marcus proposed, did he ask you or tell you? The question hit unexpectedly hard. Elena set down her fork. He told me. Said we'd been together long enough. It made sense to make it official. Showed me the ring he'd already bought. Told me he'd booked a restaurant for an engagement dinner the next week. Did you want to marry him? Elena stopped, really considering the question for the first time. I wanted to want to. I thought I was supposed to want to. We'd been together 4 years. Everyone expected it. And Marcus seemed so certain, and I'd never been certain about anything, so I just said yes. Said yes, Elena confirmed, the admission tasting like failure. He never gave you a choice. He presented you with the decision he'd already made and let you believe you'd participated. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Classic manipulation. Frame your control as consideration. Make your partner feel included while ensuring they have no actual power. You really hate him, Elena said, surprised by the vehemence in Lorenzo's voice. I hate what he represents. Men who take advantage of kind people, who exploit loyalty and call it love. Lorenzo's eyes were dark, distant. My sister, the person I mentioned yesterday, she was engaged to someone like Marcus. Charming, ambitious, always just on the verge of success. She supported him for 6 years, worked 2 jobs to pay for his business ventures, believed every promise about their future together. What happened? He left her 3 days before their wedding, found someone with better connections, more money, sent her a text message breaking the engagement, and was married to someone else within 6 months. Lorenzo's voice was carefully controlled, but Elena could hear the rage beneath. She couldn't recover. The humiliation, the financial devastation, the loss of everything she'd invested in someone who never valued her. It broke something in her. Lorenzo, I'm so sorry. He shook his head. She's getting help now. Slowly rebuilding, but she'll never be who she was before he destroyed her self-worth. He met Elena's eyes. That's why I do this. Why I help people like you. Because I couldn't help her in time, but I can make sure other men like him understand there are consequences. Elena reached across the table, placed her hand over his. I'm not your sister, and Marcus isn't. I know. Lorenzo turned his hand, briefly gripping hers. But the pattern is the same, and I won't watch another woman destroy herself over someone who never deserved her devotion. They sat in comfortable silence as the city lights began to glow below them. Elena felt something shifting inside her, a growing certainty that this arrangement with Lorenzo was about more than just showing up Marcus. It was about remembering who she'd been before she'd learned to apologize for existing. Tomorrow, Lorenzo said eventually, we start phase 2, public appearance. I'm taking you to lunch at Marcello's. Elena recognized the name. One of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, the kind of place that required reservations months in advance and had a dress code enforced by staff who could intimidate with a glance. You'll hate it, Lorenzo continued with a slight smile. Pretentious, overpriced, full of people more interested in being seen than enjoying their food. But it's also where Marcus takes his clients, where he's taken Vivian, where half the people on his wedding guest list eat lunch every week. Understanding dawned. You want to be seen with me. I want you to be seen, period. By the time we walk into that wedding, everyone who matters will have heard about you. Speculation will be rampant, and Marcus will know that you didn't just move on, you moved up. What if I'm not ready? Lorenzo's smile was confident. You will be. Trust me. Elena wanted to believe that 3 weeks could undo years of conditioning, that she could walk into a room full of people who'd witnessed her humiliation and hold her head high. Wanted to believe Lorenzo when he looked at her like she was worth this extraordinary effort. I'll try, she said. No. Lorenzo's voice was firm but not unkind. You'll succeed. There's a difference. That night, Thomas drove her home to her small apartment, which felt even more cramped and shabby after hours in Lorenzo's penthouse. But as Elena prepared for bed, she caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror and paused. She looked different. Not dramatically. The real transformation would take weeks. But something in her eyes had changed. A spark of something she hadn't seen since before Marcus left. Not quite hope. Not quite confidence. Possibility. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lorenzo. Tomorrow, wear the blue dress Simone left. Remember, you're not trying to impress anyone. You're allowing them to appreciate you. There's a difference. Elena smiled, typed back, I'll remember. She slept better than she had in months. The next morning, the blue dress fit like it had been made for her body specifically, which, she realized as she zipped it up, it probably had been. The fabric moved like water, the color making her skin glow, the cut somehow both modest and devastating. Thomas arrived exactly on time, approved of her appearance with a subtle nod, and drove her to Marcello's. Lorenzo waited outside, looking impossibly elegant in a charcoal suit, drawing eyes from every person who passed. Perfect, he said when he saw her. He offered his arm. Ready for your debut? No, Elena admitted. Good. Nerves mean you understand the stakes. His smile was reassuring. Follow my lead. Let me do most of the talking. Just be yourself, the version of yourself you're becoming. Marcello's interior was all white tablecloths and crystal and hushed conversations among people who wore their wealth like armor. The maitre d' recognized Lorenzo immediately, his professional composure cracking into genuine warmth. "Mr. DeLuca, what a pleasure. Your usual table?" "Please, Antonio." Lorenzo kept Elena close as they were led through the dining room. Elena felt eyes following them. Curious glances, assessing stares, whispered conversations cut short as they passed. Her instinct was to hunch her shoulders, to make herself smaller, to avoid the attention. Instead, she remembered Lorenzo's training: spine straight, chin level. Walk like someone who'd never questioned her right to be here. The transformation was subtle, but real. She felt heads turn, saw speculation in watching eyes. Not just about her, but about them, about who she was to command Lorenzo DeLuca's attention. Their table was perfectly positioned, visible but not exposed, with a view of the entire dining room. Lorenzo held her chair, his hand briefly touching her shoulder as she sat, a gesture that somehow seemed both protective and possessive. "Wine?" he asked. "Please." He ordered in flawless Italian, the sommelier hanging on every word. When the wine arrived, something that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck, Lorenzo poured it himself, his attention never leaving Elena. "You're doing beautifully," he said quietly. "Antonio recognized you as important the moment we walked in, not because of me, because of how you carried yourself." "I feel like I'm going to throw up." Lorenzo's laugh was genuine, warm. "Channel that energy into focus. Look around. Tell me what you see." Elena forced herself to survey the room. Wealthy couples discussing business over appetizers. Groups of impeccably dressed women analyzing everyone who entered. Men in expensive suits signaling their importance with expensive watches and practiced indifference. "I see Marcus's world," she said finally. "The world he left me for." "Look closer. What do you really see?" Elena studied the room again, trying to see past the surface. And slowly, she began to notice things. The woman in the corner checking her phone obsessively, anxiety poorly hidden behind designer sunglasses. The man 3 tables over whose smile never reached his eyes as he laughed at his companion's joke. The couple by the window who sat in silence, their body language screaming disconnection. "I see people performing," Elena said slowly, "playing roles, pretending everything is perfect while being profoundly uncomfortable." Exactly. Lorenzo's smile was approving. This world Marcus wanted so desperately to join, it's built on performance. Everyone pretending to be happier, wealthier, more successful than they are. It's exhausting and ultimately empty. And he traded something real for admission to this theater. "You're part of this world," Elena pointed out. "I exist in it. I don't belong to it. There's a difference." Lorenzo sipped his wine. "I learned early that wealth and power are tools, not identities. They can be used for good or evil, to build or to destroy. What matters is what you do with them." Their food arrived, dishes that looked like art, tasted like heaven. As they ate, Lorenzo told her about growing up in a family that valued strength above everything, about learning to navigate dangerous worlds, about choosing to use his power to help rather than harm. "My father built an empire," he said, "but he built it on the backs of people he destroyed. When I inherited his position, I spent years undoing the damage, rebuilding relationships, changing how we operated. Some people thought I was weak. They were welcome to challenge me." His smile was sharp. None of them did twice. "You're not what I expected," Elena admitted. "What did you expect?" "Someone colder, more calculating. You help people because you feel something, not because it serves you strategically." "Who says it doesn't serve me strategically?" Lorenzo's eyes glinted with amusement. "Helping you means destroying Marcus's peace of mind. That serves me perfectly." But Elena saw past the deflection. Lorenzo cared, even if he tried to hide it behind strategy and revenge. He'd been hurt by watching his sister suffer, and he was channeling that pain into protecting someone else. It was noble, wrapped in pragmatism, kindness disguised as warfare. They were finishing dessert when Elena felt her stomach drop. Marcus had just walked in. He was with 3 other men, all lawyer types in expensive suits, laughing at something one of them said. He looked successful, confident, completely at ease in this world Elena had never been allowed to fully enter. "Don't look," Lorenzo said quietly, somehow knowing exactly what had caught her attention. "Let him notice you first." "I can't." "Yes, you can. Breathe. You belong here as much as he does. More, actually, because you're not desperately trying to prove it." Elena forced herself to focus on Lorenzo, on their conversation, on appearing completely unaware of Marcus's presence. It was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. It took exactly 4 minutes, Lorenzo counted, before Marcus spotted them. Elena saw the exact moment it happened. Marcus glanced across the dining room, did a double take, then went completely still. His face cycled through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been shock. "He sees you," Lorenzo murmured. "Perfect. Now ignore him completely." Lorenzo reached across the table, took Elena's hand in his. The gesture was casual, natural, but positioned perfectly to be visible to Marcus. His thumb traced circles on her palm, his attention on her absolute. "Tell me about your favorite painting," he said, as if they were the only people in the room. Elena's mind went blank. "What?" "Your favorite painting. The one that makes you feel something when you see it. Tell me about it." She forced herself to think, to pull her attention away from Marcus's stare burning into her back. "There's a painting at the public gallery. Nobody famous, probably worth nothing, but it's this scene of a woman standing in a doorway, looking out at a storm, and you can't tell if she's about to step out into it or retreat back inside. It's called Threshold. Why does it matter to you?" "Because she looks terrified and brave at the same time, like she knows crossing that threshold will change everything, but she's considering it anyway." Elena met Lorenzo's eyes, forgot for a moment to be nervous. "I used to stand in front of it and wonder what I would do, if I'd be brave enough to step into the storm." Lorenzo's smile was soft, genuine. "And now?" "Now I'm finding out." From the corner of her eye, Elena saw Marcus moving toward their table. Lorenzo's hand tightened fractionally on hers, a silent signal. His expression didn't change, but Elena felt the shift in his energy, from relaxed to alert, predator recognizing approaching prey. "Mr. DeLuca." Marcus's voice carried forced casualness, but Elena heard the tremor beneath. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lorenzo looked up slowly, as if only just noticing Marcus's presence. His face registered polite confusion, nothing more. "I'm sorry, have we met?" The question landed like a slap. Elena watched color creep up Marcus's neck, saw his carefully constructed confidence waver. He'd expected recognition, acknowledgement of his importance. Instead, Lorenzo had dismissed him as forgettable. "Marcus Hale, Crawford and Associates." Marcus extended his hand, forcing the interaction. "We've crossed paths at several charity events. I believe we both sit on the board for the Children's Foundation." "Ah." Lorenzo's handshake was brief, perfunctory. "Forgive me. I meet many people at those functions." His tone suggested Marcus had been among the least memorable. Then, as if suddenly remembering social niceties, "This is Elena Carter." Marcus's eyes finally landed on Elena, really looking at her for the first time since approaching. She watched him process what he was seeing, the elegant dress, the confident posture, her hand still held casually in Lorenzo's. His expression cycled through emotions too quickly to name, settling on something between confusion and disbelief. "Elena." Her name came out strangled. You look." "Hello, Marcus." Elena's voice was steady, cool. She didn't pull her hand from Lorenzo's. "Congratulations on your engagement. I received your invitation." "You did?" He seemed genuinely surprised she'd acknowledged it. "I wasn't sure if Vivian thought it would be appropriate to." "It was very thoughtful." Elena smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "Lorenzo and I are looking forward to attending." Marcus's gaze snapped to Lorenzo, then back to Elena. "You're together? Is that so surprising?" Lorenzo's tone was mild, but there was steel beneath the silk. "Elena is extraordinary. I consider myself fortunate she tolerates my company." The casual possessiveness in his voice. The way he looked at Elena like she was the only person in the room. It was masterful performance. Elena felt Marcus reassessing everything he thought he knew about her, about the life he'd assumed she'd be living after he left. How long have you been? Marcus started. Marcus, one of his colleagues called from across the room, impatience clear. We're going to be late for the meeting. Relief and frustration warred on Marcus's face. He clearly wanted to continue this conversation, to understand what he was seeing, but couldn't without appearing unprofessional. I should go. But Elena, maybe we could talk sometime before the wedding? I'd like to. That's kind of you, but Lorenzo and I have a very full schedule. Elena's smile was polite, distant. I'm sure we'll have a chance to catch up at the reception. Enjoy your lunch. Dismissal, clean, and absolute. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, clearly unused to being the one ended the conversation. His eyes lingered on their joined hands, on the easy intimacy of their posture, on everything that contradicted the narrative he'd constructed about Elena's life after him. Right. Of course. I'll see you both at the wedding. He backed away awkwardly, rejoined his colleagues who were watching with poorly concealed curiosity. The moment Marcus was out of earshot, Elena's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her hand trembled in Lorenzo's. Did that really just happen? Perfectly. Lorenzo's smile was satisfied, predatory. You were flawless, polite but distant, acknowledging him without giving him importance. He expected you to be either bitter or desperate to talk to him. You gave him neither. I thought I'd feel something. Elena watched Marcus across the room, saw him glancing their direction repeatedly, while pretending to focus on his colleagues. Anger, satisfaction, something. But I just feel... nothing? Not nothing, just... He seemed smaller than I remembered, less significant. That's called perspective. Lorenzo signaled for the check. When you're in the middle of heartbreak, the person who caused it looms enormous. Step back, gain distance, and you see them for what they really are, just another flawed person making selfish choices. As they left Marcello's, Elena felt eyes tracking their movement. She heard the whispers starting, saw people leaning together to speculate. Tomorrow, the rumors would spread. Marcus's ex-girlfriend, the one he discarded so publicly, was apparently involved with Lorenzo DeLuca. The same Lorenzo DeLuca whose name carried weight in circles Marcus desperately wanted to penetrate. In the car, Thomas driving them back toward Lorenzo's penthouse, Elena finally allowed herself to process what had happened. He looked shocked, she said quietly, like he couldn't believe I'd moved on. He looked terrified, Lorenzo corrected, because he just realized his safety net has disappeared. What safety net? You. Waiting in the wings, proof that someone had loved him unconditionally, available if his new life didn't work out. Lorenzo's voice carried an edge of contempt. Men like Marcus always keep a backup plan. You were his, and he just watched that option vanish. The observation stung because it rang true. Part of her had been waiting, she realized, not hoping he'd come back exactly, but existing in a kind of stasis where the future couldn't start because the past hadn't fully ended. Seeing Marcus today, watching his carefully constructed confidence falter, had finally closed that door. Thank you, Elena said. Lorenzo looked at her questioningly. For this. For seeing something in me worth salvaging. For, her voice caught, for being kind while teaching me to be strong. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression, the calculated strategist giving way to something more genuine. You're not being salvaged, Elena. You're being excavated. Everything you're becoming was already there. I'm just helping you remember. The rest of the week passed in a blur of transformation. Every morning, Thomas collected Elena and brought her to Lorenzo's penthouse. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges, new pieces of the person she was becoming. Julian worked magic with her hair, transforming neglected waves into glossy sophistication that framed her face perfectly. V taught her makeup techniques that enhanced without masking, showing her how to highlight her natural features instead of hiding behind cosmetics. Simone brought endless options for clothing, teaching Elena the language of fashion, how different cuts and colors communicated different messages, how to dress for impact without trying too hard. But the real transformation happened in the hours Elena spent with Lorenzo. He taught her to read people, to notice the small tells that revealed true emotions beneath polished surfaces. How a person's eyes darted when they lied, how forced laughter sounded different from genuine amusement, how to distinguish between confidence and bravado. Everyone wears a mask, he explained one afternoon as they practiced conversation scenarios. The key is learning to see past it while keeping your own in place. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also powerful. When you can see people clearly while they can't see you, you control every interaction. They practiced at different venues each day. Coffee shops where Lorenzo taught her how to command attention in casual settings. Art galleries where he showed her how to discuss pieces she knew nothing about with apparent expertise. High-end boutiques where salespeople treated her like royalty because she walked in with Lorenzo, teaching her how wealth changed the way people responded. Notice how they're not actually servicing you better, Lorenzo observed after a particularly obsequious sales associate had practically bowed while showing them watches. They're performing deference. It's a show designed to make wealthy people feel important enough to spend money. See it for what it is and you're never impressed by it. Elena also spent her required hour each day painting. Lorenzo had converted a corner of his penthouse into a small studio, complete with easel, canvases, and supplies that probably cost more than her apartment's monthly rent. At first, she'd felt paralyzed by the blank canvas, by years of not creating, by fear that the ability had atrophied beyond recovery. But slowly, tentatively, her hands remembered. Images emerged, at first abstract, emotional responses to color and form, then more concrete. She painted the city from Lorenzo's windows, but darker, moodier, the buildings like guardians of secrets. She painted memories, feelings, the landscape of her own transformation. Lorenzo never commented on the paintings, but she caught him studying them when he thought she wasn't looking. Once she found him standing in front of a piece she'd done the previous day. A woman's silhouette in a doorway, storm visible beyond, clearly inspired by her favorite painting at the gallery. "You're stepping through," he said quietly when he noticed her watching. "In your version, she's already moving forward." "Maybe I needed to see someone do it first," Elena replied. "Maybe you needed to give yourself permission." The wedding invitation remained pinned to Lorenzo's refrigerator, a constant reminder of their deadline. 2 weeks became 10 days, then a week. Elena felt the pressure building, but instead of paralyzing her, it focused her energy. Every interaction became practice. Every challenge became preparation. Victoria returned for more communication coaching, this time focusing specifically on scenarios Elena would face at the wedding. They role-played conversations with Marcus's mother, with mutual friends who'd witnessed the breakup, with Vivian herself. "She'll try to mark her territory," Victoria predicted. "Probably come over to your table, be excessively sweet, make sure everyone knows Marcus is hers now." "How do you respond?" Elena considered. "I compliment her dress and change the subject." "Better, but you can go further. You compliment something specific. That shade of ivory is perfect for your complexion, much better than stark white would have been. Demonstrates you're not threatened enough to avoid details. Then, I hope you're enjoying the planning process. Marcus mentioned how much work goes into these events. Shows you and Marcus have talked, that you're comfortable enough to reference him casually. Then you redirect to Lorenzo. Lorenzo and I just got back from the most wonderful trip. Have you ever been to Como? And you've completely controlled the interaction." They practiced until Elena could navigate even the most uncomfortable scenarios with grace, until she could deflect invasive questions, redirect hostile conversations, and maintain absolute composure under pressure. "The goal," Victoria explained, "is for everyone to leave that wedding wondering who you are and how Marcus was stupid enough to let you go. Not because you tried to make them wonder, but because you're so clearly thriving that his narrative of trading up becomes obviously false." 6 days before the wedding, Lorenzo took Elena shopping for her dress. Not to department stores or even high-end boutiques, but to a private atelier where a designer named Margot apparently created custom gowns for people wealthy enough to afford her exclusive attention. "Mr. DeLuca," Margot greeted them with evident warmth. "When you called about creating something special, I cleared my schedule. This must be Elena." She studied Elena with an artist's eye, walking around her slowly, considering angles and proportions. "Beautiful bone structure. Excellent posture. That's new, yes? I can see where you're still learning to hold yourself this way. And the coloring." She touched Elena's hair gently. "We have options. Tell me, Elena, how do you want to feel in this dress?" Elena thought about it. Not powerful. That felt too aggressive. Not beautiful. That felt too shallow. Inevitable, she said finally. Like it was always going to end up this way. Like Marcus losing me was the most predictable consequence of his choices. Margot's smile was brilliant. Perfect. I know exactly what we're creating. For the next 2 hours, Elena stood while Margot worked magic with fabric and form. The designer draped, pinned, discussed with her assistants in rapid French, and slowly brought a vision to life. Elena wasn't allowed to see the result. Margot insisted on the final fitting being a reveal, but she could feel the transformation as the dress took shape around her. The wedding is in 6 days, Lorenzo mentioned, as Margot's team took final measurements. It will be ready in 4, Margot promised. Some things cannot be rushed. This is not one of them. That evening, Lorenzo surprised her by taking her to the public gallery where her favorite painting hung. They stood in front of threshold together, the woman in the doorway forever frozen in her moment of decision. You were right, Lorenzo said. She does look terrified and brave, but I think you missed something. What? Look at her shoulders, the set of her spine. Lorenzo traced the air, following the painting's lines. She's already decided. Her body language shows it. She's going into the storm. The fear is just acknowledgement of the cost. Elena studied the painting with new eyes, saw what Lorenzo saw. The woman's weight was already shifting forward. One foot was raised, mid-step. The fear was real, but the decision had been made. When did you decide? Lorenzo asked quietly. To go to the wedding, to step into this transformation. When did you commit? Elena thought back to that night in the diner, to Lorenzo's card burning a hole in her pocket, to the choice that had felt impossible. The moment I called you. Everything after has just been following through. No. Lorenzo turned to face her fully. You decided before that. The moment you didn't throw away my card, the moment you let yourself imagine something different. The decision came first. Everything else was just implementation. They walked through the gallery together, Lorenzo asking about her opinions on different pieces, drawing out observations Elena didn't know she had. She'd always loved art, but had convinced herself she didn't understand it well enough to have valid opinions. Lorenzo systematically dismantled that belief, showing her that her instincts were not only valid, but often more insightful than expert analysis. You see, emotionally, he explained as they stood before an abstract piece that seemed to pulse with barely contained violence. You respond to what the artist felt while creating, not just what they created. That's rare. Most people see art intellectually, analyzing technique and composition. You see the heart of it. Marcus used to say I was too emotional about everything, Elena admitted, that I needed to be more rational. Marcus was threatened by your ability to feel deeply because it highlighted his own emotional shallowness. Lorenzo's voice was matter of fact. Men who can't access their own emotions often criticize people who can. It's projection masquerading as advice. As they left the gallery, Elena felt something settle inside her, a quiet certainty that had been building over the past weeks through all the training and transformation and excavation of buried pieces of herself. She was ready, not because she'd become someone new, but because she'd remembered who she'd always been beneath the years of making herself smaller. The weekend before the wedding, Lorenzo took her to his family's estate outside the city. Elena had expected something grand, but nothing prepared her for the reality. A sprawling property that looked like it belonged in a European countryside, all stone and history and carefully maintained grounds. My grandfather built this, Lorenzo explained as Thomas drove them through gates that probably cost more than most houses. Wanted to create something that would last generations. Sometimes I think it's the only thing my family got right. Inside, the house was surprisingly warm despite its size. Not a museum, but a home, lived in and comfortable, even with priceless art on the walls and furniture that belonged in magazines. Lorenzo led her to a sitting room where a woman waited, elegant and poised despite the wheelchair she occupied. Elena, this is my sister Natalia. Lorenzo's voice carried a tenderness Elena had never heard before. Nat, this is Elena Carter, the woman I told you about. Natalia's smile was warm, genuine, her eyes sharp and assessing. So you're the one my brother has been obsessing over for the past 3 weeks. Sit, please. I want to hear everything. They talked for hours. Natalia asked about Elena's art, her experiences with Marcus, her thoughts on Lorenzo's transformation program. She was funny and insightful, with a wicked sense of humor that explained where Lorenzo had learned some of his sharper observations. "He told you about my situation," Natalia said eventually. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded carefully. "Good. I hate when people pretend not to know, like my catastrophic engagement is some secret instead of the defining event of my adult life." Natalia's laugh was bitter but not broken. "I'm telling you this because Lorenzo won't. He blames himself for not stopping it sooner, for not seeing what was happening until it was too late. So now he's appointed himself guardian angel for every woman dealing with a manipulative partner." "I'm not a charity case," Elena said quietly. "I know. If you were, I'd tell you to run. Lorenzo has many gifts, but pity isn't one of them." Natalia studied Elena with eyes so like her brother's. "He sees something in you, something real. I can't remember the last time he brought someone here. We're not. This is just an arrangement. After the wedding, After the wedding, you'll both have to figure out what you actually are to each other. But that's your business." Natalia smiled. "I just wanted to meet the woman who made my brother remember he's allowed to care about people." On the drive back to the city, Elena was quiet, processing everything. Lorenzo seemed content with the silence, not pushing for conversation, just existing beside her in the comfortable darkness of the car. "Your sister is remarkable," Elena said finally. "She is. Stronger than she knows, stronger than I was when I was being destroyed." Lorenzo stared out the window at passing lights. "I learned from watching her that survival isn't about not being broken. It's about choosing to rebuild even when staying shattered would be easier." "Is that what I'm doing? Rebuilding?" "No." Lorenzo met her eyes. "You were never actually broken, Elena. Just convinced you were. There's a difference." 4 days before the wedding, Margot called with news that the dress was ready. Elena arrived at the atelier with her stomach in knots, simultaneously terrified and excited to see what had been created. Margot led her to a private room where the dress waited on a mannequin, covered with a silk drape. "Before I show you, I want you to understand something. This dress is not about impressing anyone. It's not about revenge or proving anything. It's about you wearing on the outside what Lorenzo has been teaching you to feel on the inside." She removed the drape. Elena's breath caught. The dress was extraordinary. A deep midnight blue that seemed to shift in the light. The fabric cut to emphasize every line of her body without revealing anything inappropriate. Elegant, sophisticated, absolutely devastating in its simplicity. No excessive embellishment, no desperate attempts at attention, just perfect, confident beauty. "Try it on," Margot urged. When Elena emerged from the dressing room and saw herself in the full mirror, she barely recognized her reflection. The woman looking back at her stood tall, poised, absolutely certain of her worth. The dress somehow transformed her, or perhaps simply revealed what had always been there. Margot made minor adjustments, her team fluttering around with pins and measuring tapes. But the dress needed almost no alteration. It fit perfectly, moved with Elena like it had been created specifically for her body, which she supposed it had. "When you walk into that wedding," Margot said quietly, fastening the final hook, "every person there will realize exactly what Marcus lost. Not because you'll try to make them realize it, because it will be impossible to miss." Lorenzo arrived to collect her just as she was changing back into her regular clothes. Margot showed him photos of the dress, and Elena watched his expression shift from polite interest to something deeper, more intense. "Perfect," he said simply. "Absolutely perfect." The final days blurred together in a cascade of last-minute preparations. Victoria conducted final communication drills. Simone ensured every accessory was perfect, every detail considered. Julian did a trial run of her hair. V practiced her makeup until Elena could nearly replicate it herself. The night before the wedding, Lorenzo took her to dinner at a small, quiet restaurant, completely unlike the grand establishments they'd been frequenting. No one recognized him here. No one stared. It was just two people sharing a meal. "Tomorrow, everything changes," Lorenzo said over wine that tasted like summer and promises. "You walk into that wedding as someone completely different from the woman Marcus discarded." "Not different," Elena corrected, remembering his own words. "Just finally visible. How do you feel?" Elena considered the question honestly. Terrified, excited, ready, like I'm standing in a doorway looking at a storm, and I've already decided to walk through it. Lorenzo's smile was soft, almost proud. Then there's only one question left. What? After tomorrow, after you've proven everything you needed to prove, shown Marcus and everyone else exactly what he lost, what comes next for Elena Carter? It was a question Elena had been avoiding, focusing so completely on the wedding that she hadn't let herself think beyond it. But now, forced to confront it, she realized something surprising. I don't know, she admitted. For the first time in my life, I have no idea what comes next. And that doesn't terrify me. It feels like freedom. Good. Lorenzo raised his glass. To not knowing, to uncertain futures and reclaimed power, to women who walk into storms because they've learned they're strong enough to weather them. Elena touched her glass to his. To second chances. To people who see potential in strangers. To, her voice caught slightly, to you, Lorenzo. For everything. Something passed between them in that moment, something neither was quite ready to name. The space between arrangement and genuine connection, between strategy and feeling, between what they'd agreed to be and what they might actually be becoming. Tomorrow, Lorenzo said quietly, we finish what we started, and then we figure out what comes next. Elena slept fitfully that night, dreams mixing with reality until she couldn't distinguish between memory and imagination. She dreamed of Marcus's face when he saw her, of walking through crowded rooms with her head held high, of storms and thresholds and women brave enough to step through doorways into unknown futures. When she woke, pale light filtering through her apartment windows, Elena felt calm settle over her like a benediction. Today was the day. Today, she would walk into Marcus Hale's wedding and prove to herself, not to him, not to anyone else, but to herself, that she was more than the small, invisible person she'd learned to be. Today, Elena Carter would reclaim her power. And tomorrow, she would decide what to do with it. Thomas arrived at Elena's apartment at exactly 4 in the afternoon, the Mercedes gleaming like dark water under the late spring sun. He carried the dress himself, protected in layers of tissue and garment bags, treating it with the reverence of someone transporting precious cargo. Mr. DeLuca is already at the estate, Thomas said, as he carefully hung the dress in Elena's tiny bedroom. He thought you might prefer some privacy while getting ready. He'll meet you there at 6. Elena nodded, grateful for Lorenzo's understanding. She needed these hours alone, needed to center herself before stepping into the performance of a lifetime. Because that's what it was, she reminded herself. A performance. Strategic warfare wrapped in silk and confidence. Except it didn't feel like performance anymore. Not entirely. She showered in water as hot as she could stand, washing away the last traces of the woman she used to be. Applied the skincare routine V had taught her with meditative precision. Styled her hair the way Julian had shown her, the glossy waves falling perfectly to frame her face. Applied makeup with a steady hand, enhancing her features until the woman in the mirror looked both familiar and foreign. When she finally stepped into Margot's creation, the transformation completed itself. The midnight blue fabric settled against her skin like it had been waiting for her, the cut emphasizing curves Elena had learned to hide, the color making her complexion glow. She fastened the delicate silver jewelry Simone had selected, simple, elegant, expensive without being ostentatious. Slipped on heels that added 3 inches to her height and somehow made her feel grounded rather than precarious. Elena stood before her apartment's cheap, full-length mirror, the same mirror that had reflected her tears 6 months ago when Marcus left, the same mirror that had shown her broken reflection day after day as she tried to piece herself back together. Now it showed someone else entirely, someone powerful, someone certain, someone who knew exactly what she was worth. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lorenzo. Remember, you're not trying to prove anything. You're simply allowing them to see what was always there. Elena smiled, typed back, I remember. Thank you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'll see you soon. And Elena, you're going to be magnificent. Thomas drove her through the city as it transitioned from afternoon to evening, buildings casting long shadows across streets Elena had walked countless times as someone smaller, someone afraid to take up space. That person felt like a distant memory now, a character from someone else's story. The Grandview estate sat on 20 acres of manicured grounds just outside the city limits, all rolling lawns and ancient oak trees and stone architecture designed to evoke old money and older privilege. Valets in crisp uniforms directed arriving vehicles, guests in expensive formal wear streaming toward the ceremony site like beautiful, glittering rivers. Thomas bypassed the main entrance, driving instead to a smaller gate that opened automatically at their approach. He brought her to a private entrance where Lorenzo waited. Elena's breath caught when she saw him. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than her yearly salary, tailored to perfection, making him look simultaneously elegant and dangerous. But it was his expression when he saw her that made her heart stutter, something beyond appreciation, beyond satisfaction with a successful transformation, something that looked almost like wonder. Elena. Her name was reverent on his lips. He descended the steps, offered his hand. "You look—" He stopped, seemed to search for adequate words, gave up. "There are no words. Margot did good work. Margot did extraordinary work, but the dress is just fabric." Lorenzo's hand touched her waist, steadying her as she stepped from the car. "This," he gestured to all of her, "this is all you. Everything I saw that first night in the diner, everything Marcus was too blind to value." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, fought the instinct to deflect the compliment. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Lorenzo's smile was slight, amused. "We're going to be late. Fashionably, strategically late. The ceremony starts at 6:30. We'll arrive at 6:45 after everyone is seated but before the bride's entrance. Maximum visibility, maximum impact. Have you done this before? Made a dramatic entrance to someone's wedding to prove a point?" Lorenzo's eyes glinted with dark humor. "Only twice. Both times very satisfying." He led her through the private entrance into a side room decorated with obvious expense. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers that probably cost thousands, furniture that belonged in museums. Through the windows, Elena could see the ceremony site. Rows of white chairs filled with elegantly dressed guests, an arbor dripping with roses, string quartet playing soft classical pieces. "How many people?" Elena asked, her stomach tightening. 240, according to the guest list." Lorenzo checked his watch with practiced ease. Judges, senior partners from Marcus's firm, old money families, social climbers trying to network their way up. Everyone who matters in Marcus's new world. "And they're all about to see me. They're all about to see us." Lorenzo turned to face her fully, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Elena. In 10 minutes, we walk into that ceremony. Heads will turn. Whispers will start. Marcus will see you and realize exactly what he threw away, but none of that matters as much as what you realize, which is that you never needed his validation, that you were always this powerful, this valuable, this extraordinary. He didn't make you who you are. He just temporarily convinced you to hide it." Lorenzo's gaze was intense, unwavering. "After tonight, when all of this is over, I want you to remember that feeling. Because it's real, Elena. Not performance, not strategy. The truth of who you've always been." Elena felt tears threaten, blinked them back. "If I cry, V will kill me for ruining her makeup work." "Then don't cry." Lorenzo smiled, gentle and devastating. "Save the tears for later, when you're alone and can afford to feel everything. Right now, we have a wedding to attend." At 6:43, they began the walk to the ceremony site. Lorenzo offered his arm, Elena took it, and they moved together through the gardens like they'd been doing this dance for years instead of weeks. She could feel the weight of his presence beside her, solid and reassuring, could sense the controlled power in how he carried himself. The ceremony had already begun. The officiant was speaking, voice carrying across the assembled guests, something about love and commitment and forever. No one had noticed their arrival yet, everyone's attention focused forward, on Marcus standing at the altar in his perfect tuxedo, waiting for his perfect bride. Lorenzo and Elena appeared at the edge of the seating area just as the officiant asked everyone to rise for the bride's entrance. Perfect timing. As 240 people stood, turning to watch Vivian's approach, they saw instead Lorenzo DeLuca and his stunning companion making their way calmly down the side aisle toward empty seats near the front. The whisper started immediately. Elena heard her name ripple through the crowd, heard the confusion and speculation and shocked recognition. Felt eyes lock onto her from every direction, felt the weight of collective attention that would have paralyzed her 6 months ago. Instead, she kept her chin level, her spine straight, her hand steady on Lorenzo's arm. She smiled politely at people she vaguely recognized from Marcus's work events, nodded graciously at strangers whose stares bordered on rude, moved through the crowd like she had every right to be there. Because she did. They reached their seats, fifth row, aisle side, impossible to miss, just as Vivian appeared at the far end of the aisle. The bride looked beautiful in the way wealthy women always did at their weddings. Designer gown, professional styling, the kind of polished perfection that came from unlimited resources and careful planning. But Elena barely noticed Vivian. Her attention had snagged on Marcus, who had turned at the commotion of their late arrival and now stood frozen at the altar, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to catalog. Shock, disbelief, something that might have been regret. Their eyes met across the rows of seated guests. For a moment, everything else fell away. The music, the crowd, the ceremony about to begin. Just Elena and Marcus, connected by 4 years of history and 6 months of aftermath, seeing each other clearly for perhaps the first time. Elena smiled. Small, polite, absolutely genuine. Then she turned her attention to Vivian's approach, dismissing Marcus as completely as he'd once dismissed her. Beside her, Lorenzo's hand found hers, squeezed gently. She felt his approval, his satisfaction, his pride in how she'd handled that moment. But beneath it, she felt something else, something warmer, more personal than their strategic partnership had intended. The ceremony proceeded in a blur of traditional vows and rehearsed words. Marcus stumbled twice over his lines, his attention repeatedly drifting to where Elena sat, composed and lovely, her hand still held loosely in Lorenzo's. Vivian noticed. Elena saw her follow Marcus's gaze, saw confusion flicker across the bride's perfect features. When the officiant pronounced them married and Marcus kissed his new wife, Elena felt nothing. No pain, no jealousy, no longing for what might have been. Just a strange, peaceful certainty that this was exactly how things were supposed to unfold. Marcus had chosen this life, this person, this performance of happiness, and Elena had chosen something else entirely. The cocktail hour following the ceremony was strategic warfare disguised as socializing. Guests clustered in small groups throughout the estate's grand ballroom, drinking champagne that probably cost more per bottle than Elena used to make in a week, trading gossip and speculation with the hunger of people for whom social currency mattered more than actual achievement. Elena and Lorenzo entered together, a united front against the inevitable onslaught of attention. Within seconds, people began approaching, some with genuine warmth, others with barely concealed curiosity, all wanting to understand what they were seeing. Elena Carter, is that really you? Martha Goldstein, one of Marcus's mother's society friends, descended on them with predatory interest. I hardly recognized you. You look so different. Mrs. Goldstein, how lovely to see you again. Elena's smile was warm, genuine. You look wonderful. Is that a new necklace? The emeralds are stunning. Deflection and compliment, exactly as Victoria had taught her. Martha preened, momentarily distracted from her obvious intention to interrogate Elena about her transformation. This is Lorenzo DeLuca, Elena continued smoothly. Lorenzo, Martha Goldstein has been involved with the Symphony Fundraising Committee for as long as I can remember. Her dedication to the arts is really inspiring. Lorenzo shook Martha's hand with perfect courtesy, his expression pleasant but reserved. Any friend of Elena's is someone I'm pleased to meet, though I must confess she's told me relatively little about her life before we met. She seems determined to focus on the present rather than the past. The implication was clear. Elena had moved on so completely that her previous life barely warranted discussion. Martha's eyes widened slightly, her gaze darting between them as she reassessed everything she thought she knew. Well, Martha said, clearly struggling to maintain composure. It's certainly wonderful to see you looking so well, Elena. And Mr. DeLuca, what a pleasant surprise to meet you. I believe my husband knows your family. The DeLucas from the banking consortium, correct? Among other interests, Lorenzo agreed mildly, though I try to avoid discussing business at weddings. Seems inappropriate when we should be celebrating love. The word love landed deliberately. Martha's gaze sharpened, and Elena could practically see her mental calculations. How serious was this relationship? How quickly had it developed? What did it mean for the narrative everyone had constructed about poor Elena Carter, abandoned and heartbroken? They navigated similar conversations for the next hour. Old colleagues of Marcus who remembered Elena as quiet and forgettable, now struggling to reconcile memory with reality. Society women who'd never noticed her before, suddenly interested in where she'd gotten her dress, who did her hair, how she'd met Lorenzo DeLuca. Men who looked at her with new appreciation, who suddenly wanted to discuss art and culture and anything that might hold her attention. Through it all, Lorenzo remained at her side, protective without being possessive, attentive without being overwhelming. He had a gift for reading situations, for knowing exactly when to interject and when to let Elena handle conversations herself. When someone became too intrusive, he redirected smoothly. When Elena seemed comfortable, he stepped back and let her shine. "You're doing it again." Marcus's voice came from behind them, tight with poorly suppressed emotion. Elena turned slowly, unsurprised. She'd been expecting this confrontation since they arrived. Marcus stood alone, Vivian apparently occupied elsewhere, his tuxedo perfect, but his expression fractured. "Doing what?" Elena asked calmly. "Pretending." Marcus gestured vaguely at her, at Lorenzo, at everything. "This isn't you, Elena. This person you're playing, the clothes, the confidence, him, it's not real." Lorenzo's posture shifted subtly, become more alert, more dangerous. But Elena touched his arm gently, a signal that she wanted to handle this herself. "You're right," she said quietly. "This isn't the person you knew, because the person you knew was performing for you, making herself smaller so you could feel bigger, hiding her potential so you wouldn't feel threatened. That was the pretense, Marcus. This," she gestured to herself, "this is just me, finally done apologizing for existing." Marcus's jaw worked. "I never asked you to apologize. You didn't have to ask. You just created an environment where being less was the only way to keep you happy." Elena's voice remained steady, factual rather than accusatory. "I'm not angry about it anymore. I understand now that you needed someone who wouldn't challenge you, who'd support your ambitions without developing her own. I was perfect for that role. Until I wasn't." "That's not... I cared about you, Elena. I did. You cared about what I could do for you. There's a difference." Elena smiled, the expression sad but genuine. "I hope you and Vivian are happy, Marcus. I really do. I hope she gives you everything you're looking for, and I hope someday you figure out that what you're looking for isn't the same as what you actually need." She turned to leave, Lorenzo moving with her, but Marcus's voice stopped them. "Did he pay for all of this?" The question was sharp, designed to wound. "The dress? The transformation? The whole performance? Is that how this works? You found someone with deeper pockets to fund your reinvention?" Lorenzo moved before Elena could respond, stepping between her and Marcus with controlled menace. When he spoke, his voice was soft, deadly. "Careful, Marcus. You're at your own wedding, surrounded by everyone you're desperately trying to impress. Making a scene right now would be professionally catastrophic. So I'm going to give you one chance to apologize to Elena for that disrespectful comment, and then we're going to walk away and let you return to your bride." Marcus's face flushed. "I don't take orders from..." "You're not taking orders, you're making a choice." Lorenzo's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Option 1, apologize like a man who recognizes he's out of line. Option 2, I very calmly, very publicly explain to everyone at this wedding exactly what kind of person you are. Names, dates, specifics about how you used Elena for years and discarded her the moment someone more advantageous came along. Your new in-laws will be fascinated." The threat hung in the air between them. Marcus's eyes widened as he realized Lorenzo wasn't bluffing, that he had the social capital and the ruthlessness to follow through. "I apologize," Marcus said finally, the words dragged out through clenched teeth. "That was inappropriate." "To Elena," Lorenzo corrected, "and mean it." Marcus's gaze found Elena, and for just a moment she saw past his anger to the fear beneath. Fear that he'd made a terrible mistake. Fear that he'd traded something real for something transactional. Fear that in 10 years he'd look back on this moment and realize he'd let the best thing in his life walk away. I'm sorry, Elena, Marcus said, and this time it sounded almost genuine. That was unfair. You deserve better than that comment. Well, Elena nodded, accepting the apology without granting forgiveness. I hope you enjoy your wedding, Marcus. Truly. She walked away on Lorenzo's arm, feeling Marcus's stare burning into her back, feeling the eyes of everyone who'd witnessed the confrontation tracking their movement. The whispers would be vicious tomorrow. The speculation would run wild. But none of it mattered because Elena had done what she came to do, prove to herself that Marcus no longer had the power to hurt her. The reception dinner was an elaborate affair. Multiple courses served on china that probably cost more than furniture, wine flowing freely, toasts that ranged from heartfelt to performative. Elena and Lorenzo sat at a table with people they didn't know, which suited them perfectly. It meant no one interrogated them, no one demanded explanations, no one expected them to engage beyond polite pleasantries. How are you feeling? Lorenzo asked quietly as waiters cleared the salad course. Lighter, Elena admitted. Like I've been carrying something heavy for months and finally set it down. Good. That was the point. Marcus's mother approached their table as dessert was being served, her expression carefully neutral. Patricia Hale had never liked Elena, had made no secret of her belief that her son could do better, that Elena's background wasn't suitable for the life Marcus deserved. She'd been politely cruel in the way only wealthy women could be, delivering insults disguised as concern. Elena, might I have a word? Patricia's tone suggested it wasn't really a question. Lorenzo started to rise, protective instinct engaged, but Elena touched his arm. It's fine. I'll be right back. She followed Patricia to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the crowd, prepared for whatever criticism was coming. I wanted to apologize, Patricia said, and Elena's prepared defenses crumbled in surprise. I treated you terribly while you and Marcus were together. I was cruel and dismissive, and I justified it by telling myself I was protecting my son from making a mistake. She paused, her carefully maintained composure cracking slightly. I was wrong. You were good for him. You made him better, kinder, more grounded, and I should have valued that instead of focusing on your background, your circumstances, all the superficial things that don't actually matter. Elena stood speechless, completely unprepared for this turn. Marcus has changed since Vivian, Patricia continued. He's harder now, more calculating. He's become the kind of man his father was, and I'd hoped he'd be different. She met Elena's eyes directly. I see what you've become without him, how you've thrived, and I realize now that he needed you far more than you ever needed him. Mrs. Hale, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that some of us recognize what was lost when Marcus made his choice. Patricia glanced back toward the head table where Marcus sat beside Vivian, both smiling for photographers. I hope you're happy, Elena, with Lorenzo or without him. You deserve happiness. You always did. She walked away before Elena could respond, leaving her standing alone, emotions churning. The apology felt genuine, unexpected, and somehow more meaningful than anything Marcus could have said. Lorenzo appeared at her elbow, concerned. Everything all right? Yes, just... Elena shook her head. Sometimes people surprise you. The dancing began as evening deepened into night. Marcus and Vivian took the floor for their first dance, performing practiced steps to a song that probably had sentimental meaning, their movements precise and perfect and somehow soulless. When the song ended and others were invited to join, Lorenzo extended his hand to Elena. Dance with me? Elena let him lead her onto the floor, into the traditional waltz position, his hand warm against her back, her hand fitting naturally in his. They moved together with surprising ease, Lorenzo leading with quiet confidence, Elena following instinctively. You can dance, she said, surprised. I have many skills. Lorenzo's smile was amused. Some more useful than others. They swayed together among the other couples, separate from the crowd despite being surrounded by it. Elena found herself relaxing into the movement, into the warmth of Lorenzo's presence, into the strange intimacy of this moment that existed outside their careful strategy. Thank you, she said softly, for all of this, for seeing something in me worth excavating, for not giving up even when I was convinced there was nothing to find. Elena, Lorenzo's voice was gentle. I didn't create anything. I just held up a mirror and made you look at what was already there. Still, you could have walked past me in that diner, could have ignored my heartbreak and ordered your coffee and left. But you didn't. And my entire life is different because of it. Lorenzo's hand tightened fractionally on hers. My life is different too. You reminded me why I do this, why I fight against men like Marcus, why I invest in people others have dismissed. You reminded me that sometimes broken systems can be challenged. Sometimes the underestimated can rise. Sometimes the story doesn't have to end with the powerful winning. They danced in silence for a moment, the music swelling around them, other couples spinning past in blurs of color and motion. Elena felt something shifting between them, the careful boundaries of their arrangement becoming permeable, complicated by genuine feeling neither had anticipated. What happens after tonight? Elena asked, voicing the question that had been hovering unspoken between them for days. We've done what we came to do. I've proven I'm not broken. Marcus knows what he lost. The mission is complete. Lorenzo was quiet for several measures of music. When he finally spoke, his voice carried unusual vulnerability. That depends on what you want, Elena. This arrangement was always temporary. You're free to walk away, to take everything you've learned and build whatever life you choose. No obligations, no expectations. And if I don't want to walk away? Lorenzo's dark eyes met hers, searching. Then we figure out what we are when we're not playing roles. When there's no wedding to attend, no ex to convince, no transformation to complete. Just two people who... He stopped, seemed to reconsider. Two people who might have found something real in the middle of strategic warfare. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, complicated by the strange circumstances of how they'd met, by the power dynamic inherent in Lorenzo's wealth and influence, by the question of whether what they felt was genuine or just a product of intensity and proximity. But looking at Lorenzo now, feeling the warmth of his hand on her back, remembering every moment of the past 3 weeks, the patience, the insight, the way he'd seen her when she was invisible to everyone else, Elena couldn't dismiss it as simple circumstance. I want to find out, she said quietly, what we are when this is over. I want to see if this is real. Lorenzo's smile was slow, genuine, devastating. Then that's what we'll do. The song ended. They separated reluctantly, returning to the edges of the celebration as other couples took the floor. Elena excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment alone to process everything. The confrontation with Marcus, Patricia's unexpected apology, the shift in her relationship with Lorenzo from strategic partnership to something undefined but promising. The bathroom was luxurious in the way everything at this wedding was. All marble and gold fixtures and flowers that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Elena stood at the mirror, studying her reflection. The elegant dress, the perfect makeup, the confidence in her posture that no longer required conscious effort. She looked like someone who belonged in this world. But more importantly, she felt like someone who didn't need this world's validation to know her worth. The door opened. Vivian entered, still perfect in her elaborate gown, though Elena noticed slight signs of strain around her eyes, tension in how she held her shoulders. Elena, Vivian's voice was carefully neutral. I was hoping to catch you alone. Elena turned, waiting. Whatever was coming, she could handle it. I wanted to thank you, Vivian said, and Elena blinked in surprise. Thank me? For letting him go. For not fighting when he chose me. Vivian's smile was tight, practiced. It would have been messy if you'd contested the breakup. Dramatic. The kind of thing that affects careers and reputations. Elena studied the woman Marcus had chosen over her, really looked at her for the first time. Vivian was beautiful in the way money could make people beautiful. Professionally maintained, carefully styled, every detail perfect. But her eyes were calculating, assessing, looking at Elena like a competitor even on her wedding day. I didn't let him go, Elena said quietly. He left. There's a difference. Still, you handled it gracefully. No scenes, no confrontations. Very mature. Vivian checked her reflection, adjusted an already perfect curl. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about your dramatic transformation. The new look, the mysterious boyfriend, showing up here looking like you stepped out of a fashion magazine. It's very... She paused, searching for the word. Pointed. I'm not here to make a point, Elena said, and realized as she spoke that it was completely true. I'm here because I was invited, because walking into this wedding and seeing Marcus happy with you doesn't hurt anymore, because I've moved on with my life, and I'm genuinely glad he's found someone who suits him better than I did. Vivian's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. You're saying I suit Marcus? I'm saying you suit what Marcus wants. Status, connections, the right background, access to the right circles, all the things I could never give him. Elena met Vivian's eyes directly. I hope that's enough. I hope when the performances end and you're alone together, there's something real underneath all the strategy. Because if there's not, she paused, choosing her words carefully, then you've both settled for a beautiful prison instead of messy freedom. She left Vivian standing speechless in the bathroom, returned to Lorenzo, who waited exactly where she'd left him, his attention tracking her movement across the room like she was the only person who mattered. Ready to leave? He asked, reading her expression accurately. More than ready. They made their exit quietly. No dramatic departure, no final confrontation. Just two people slipping away from a party that no longer held any relevance to their lives. Thomas had the car waiting, and soon they were gliding through the night back toward the city, leaving the Grandview estate and everything it represented behind. You were perfect tonight, Lorenzo said into the comfortable silence. Beyond what I imagined. You didn't just prove Marcus wrong, you proved yourself right. Elena leaned her head back against the leather seat, exhaustion and exhilaration mixing in her veins. It's strange. I thought I'd feel victorious, triumphant, like I'd won something, but I just feel free? Yes, like I've been released from something I didn't even know was holding me captive. Lorenzo's hand found hers in the darkness of the car, their fingers intertwining naturally. That's because you have been. For years you've been living in Marcus's story about who you were supposed to be. Tonight, you started writing your own. They rode in silence through familiar streets that somehow looked different now, the city transformed by Elena's changed perspective. Everything felt possible suddenly, the future expanding beyond the narrow confines she'd accepted for so long. When they reached her apartment building, Lorenzo walked her to her door despite the late hour. What happens tomorrow? Elena asked, key in hand but not yet ready to say goodnight. Tomorrow, you sleep late. You process everything. You let yourself feel whatever comes. Lorenzo smiled, gentle in the dim hallway light. And when you're ready, you call me. We have dinner like normal people. We talk about things that aren't strategic warfare. We figure out who we are without an agenda. And if we discover we're nothing without the mission, that this was just intensity and proximity and the thrill of revenge, then at least we'll know, we'll have tried. Lorenzo's hand came up, cupped her cheek with surprising tenderness. But I don't think that's what we'll find, Elena. I think we're going to discover that what started as strategy became something real when we weren't paying attention. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, time to stop this before it became something that couldn't be undone. Elena didn't pull away. She met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like confirmation, like the answer to a question neither had been brave enough to ask out loud. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Lorenzo smiled. Sleep well, Elena Carter. Tomorrow, your new life begins. He left her standing in her doorway, key still clutched in her hand, lips still tingling from his kiss, heart full of possibility she hadn't felt in years. Elena entered her apartment, the same small space that had witnessed her heartbreak 6 months ago. But everything felt different now. The walls seemed less confining, the future less terrifying. The woman reflected in the window someone she finally recognized. She undressed slowly, carefully hanging Margot's creation in her closet where it looked absurdly elegant among her regular clothes. Washed off V's perfect makeup, removed Julian's careful styling, stood in her bathroom in simple pajamas, facing herself without armor or artifice. The woman looking back at her was the same one who'd existed before the transformation, before Lorenzo, before the past 3 weeks of intensive reconstruction. But she stood differently now, saw herself differently, new, with bone-deep certainty that she was valuable not because of how she looked or who wanted her, but because of who she'd always been beneath the years of learned invisibility. Elena climbed into bed as dawn began painting her windows with pale light, exhausted but unable to sleep. She replayed the evening in her mind. Marcus's shock, Patricia's apology, Vivian's calculation, Lorenzo's kiss. Each moment a piece of the larger story, each interaction proof that she'd done what she'd set out to do. She'd reclaimed herself. Her phone buzzed, a text from Lorenzo. "Stop overthinking, get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be extraordinary." Elena smiled, typed back, "How do you know I'm overthinking?" His response came immediately. "Because I know you. Sleep, Elena. Dream about your future, not his." She set down her phone, closed her eyes, and let herself drift. When sleep finally came, Elena dreamed not of the past or revenge or proving anyone wrong. She dreamed of blank canvases waiting to be filled, of doorways leading to unknown rooms, of storms she was brave enough to walk through because she'd finally learned she was strong enough to weather anything. The wedding was over, the performance complete, the mission accomplished. But Elena Carter's story was just beginning. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and the unfamiliar sensation of peace. For the first time in 6 months, she didn't reach for her phone to check if Marcus had called, didn't replay their relationship searching for signs she'd missed, didn't wonder what she could have done differently to make him stay. Instead, she stretched luxuriously, felt the pleasant ache in her feet from dancing in heels, and smiled at the memory of Lorenzo's kiss in the hallway. The wedding felt like something that had happened years ago instead of hours, already fading into the category of things completed rather than things consuming her thoughts. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize and a text from her former roommate, Sarah. "Elena. What the hell? Everyone is talking about you and Lorenzo DeLuca. Call me." Elena ignored it. The gossip and speculation didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet certainty settling in her chest that she'd walked through the storm and emerged on the other side, not unscathed but undestroyed, stronger for having weathered it. She spent the morning painting, not the careful, tentative strokes of someone rediscovering a forgotten skill, but bold, confident movements of someone reclaiming their voice. The canvas filled with color and emotion, abstract forms that somehow captured everything she'd experienced over the past 3 weeks. Transformation as art, pain converted to beauty, endings that were actually beginnings. Lorenzo called just after noon, his voice warm with satisfaction. "You're painting. I can hear it in your voice." "How can you hear painting?" "You sound centered, grounded. That only happens when you're creating." He paused, and Elena could picture him in his penthouse, probably standing by those enormous windows overlooking the city. "How are you feeling about last night?" "Good. Really good, actually. Like I closed a chapter I didn't realize was still open." Elena set down her brush, wiped paint-stained fingers on a cloth. "Marcus texted me this morning." Lorenzo's tone sharpened. "What did he say?" "I didn't read it. I blocked his number." The admission felt powerful, final. "Whatever he has to say doesn't matter anymore. That part of my life is finished. I'm proud of you." The words were simple but carried weight. That takes real strength, choosing to move forward instead of seeking closure through conversation. "I learned from the best." Elena smiled, felt warmth spread through her chest. "So, about that dinner, the one where we figure out what we are without an agenda. Tonight, 7 o'clock, I'll pick you up." Lorenzo's voice softened. "And Elena, wear whatever makes you comfortable, not what you think I want to see. Not what makes a statement, just what feels right to you." He hung up before she could respond, leaving Elena standing in her small apartment with paint on her hands and possibility humming in her veins. She looked at her closet, the designer pieces Simone had selected hanging beside her old clothes, 2 wardrobes representing 2 versions of herself. Elena chose jeans that actually fit, a soft sweater in deep green that brought out her eyes, boots that were comfortable and stylish without trying too hard. She left her hair loose, applied minimal makeup, looked in the mirror and saw someone who didn't need armor or performance. Just herself, confident in her own skin. Lorenzo arrived exactly on time, and Elena's breath caught when she opened the door. He wore jeans and a simple black shirt, no suit, no calculated elegance. Just a man coming to collect a woman for dinner, normal and ordinary and somehow more attractive for the lack of pageantry. You look beautiful, he said simply. So do you. Elena grabbed her jacket. Where are we going? You'll see. Thomas drove them not to another exclusive restaurant, but to a small Italian place in a neighborhood Elena barely knew existed. The kind of family-owned establishment with checkered tablecloths and wine served in simple glasses and food that smelled like someone's grandmother had been cooking all day. My grandfather used to bring me here, Lorenzo explained as they settled into a corner booth. Before he died, before I inherited everything, when I was just a kid trying to figure out who I wanted to be. This place reminds me that real value has nothing to do with price tags or exclusivity. They ordered without looking at menus, Lorenzo speaking rapid Italian with the owner who hugged him like family, asked about his sister, demanded to know who the beautiful woman was. Elena watched the interaction with growing understanding. This was Lorenzo without the armor, without the strategic calculation, just a man with history and connection and genuine affection for people who knew him before he became powerful. Tell me about your art, Lorenzo said when they were alone again. Wine poured, bread basket between them. Not what you paint. Why you paint. What it does for you. Elena considered the question, really thought about it instead of deflecting. It's the only time I feel completely honest. When I'm painting, I can't lie, can't perform or pretend or be what someone else needs. It's just pure expression of whatever's inside, translated to canvas. Is that why you stopped? When you were with Marcus? Partly. He never directly told me to quit, but he had this way of making everything feel like a competition for resources. Time, money, attention. His career was important, my art was a hobby, and I internalized that until I believed it too. Elena broke off a piece of bread, not eating it, just needing something to do with her hands. Looking back, I realized how much I disappeared. Not all at once, just gradual erosion until I didn't recognize myself anymore. Lorenzo reached across the table, covered her hand with his. You're not that person anymore. No, but I'm also not entirely sure who I am without her, or without you. Elena met his eyes. That's what scares me, Lorenzo. What if I've just traded one dependency for another? What if I needed you to believe in me because I still can't believe in myself? Then we work on that. Together, if you want. Separately, if you need. Lorenzo's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture becoming familiar, comforting. I'm not Marcus, Elena. I don't need you to be small so I can feel big. Your growth, your successes, your happiness, they don't threaten me. They fulfill something in me I didn't know was empty. Their food arrived, interrupting the moment but not breaking it. They ate and talked about everything except the wedding, except Marcus, except the strategic mission that had brought them together. Lorenzo told her about growing up in a family that valued power over everything, about choosing a different path, about his sister's slow recovery and the guilt he still carried for not protecting her sooner. Elena shared memories of her childhood, of her mother working endless hours to keep them afloat, of learning early that needing less meant being less of a burden. She talked about discovering art in high school, about a teacher who'd seen potential and nurtured it, about the scholarship to art school she'd turned down because Marcus's law school was in a different city and she'd chosen him over her dreams without even realizing it was a choice. Do you regret it? Lorenzo asked. Choosing him over art school? Elena thought about it honestly. I regret not realizing I was choosing. I regret believing my dreams mattered less than his, but I don't regret the path that led me here, to this moment, to you. If I'd gone to art school, I'd be someone else entirely. Maybe happier, maybe more successful, but I wouldn't be me, sitting here, having learned what I've learned about my own strength. Lorenzo smiled, something tender in his expression. That's wisdom, Elena. Real wisdom, earned through pain and reflection. Most people never get there. They lingered over dinner, conversation flowing easily, no awkward silences or forced topics. When they finally left, Lorenzo asked if she wanted to go back to his penthouse or if she preferred he take her home. Your place, Elena said, surprising herself with the certainty. I'm not ready for tonight to end yet. The penthouse felt different at night, the city lights creating their own constellation beyond the windows. Lorenzo poured them wine, and they settled on the sofa, comfortable silence wrapping around them like a blanket. I spoke with Michaela Chen this morning, Lorenzo said eventually. From the Rivera Gallery. She wants to meet you, see your work. I told her you'd call when you were ready. Elena's heart jumped. The Rivera Gallery was serious, prestigious, the kind of place real artists showed their work. Lorenzo, I'm not... Don't. His voice was firm but gentle. Don't diminish yourself. Don't decide you're not ready or not good enough. Just consider it. Meet with her. Show her what you've been creating. Let someone with expertise tell you what they see. What if she hates it? What if I'm not actually good, just delusional about my own talent? Then you learn and grow and create more. But Elena, Lorenzo turned to face her fully. I've seen your work. I'm not an expert, but I know enough to recognize real talent. You have something. Whether it becomes a career or stays a passion, it deserves to be seen. Elena felt tears threaten, blinked them back. Why do you keep doing this? Believing in me when I don't believe in myself? Because someone has to, until you're strong enough to do it alone. And because... Lorenzo paused, seemed to consider his words carefully. Because somewhere along the way this stopped being about Marcus or revenge or proving a point. It became about you. About wanting to see you thrive. About caring what happens to you beyond the mission we set out to complete. Lorenzo. Elena's voice was soft, uncertain. What is this? What are we? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. I don't know. I know what we were. Partners in strategic warfare, allies in your transformation. I know what I want us to be. But I need to know what you want, Elena. Without pressure, without gratitude influencing your choice. What do you actually want? Elena set down her wine glass, turned to face him fully. I want to find out if this is real. If what we feel is genuine connection or just intensity born from circumstance. I want to date you properly, without agendas or missions. I want to see who we are when we're not performing for anyone. She paused, gathering courage. And I want to do it while also figuring out who I am alone. Not as Marcus's girlfriend, not as your project. Just Elena Carter, artist, woman, person still discovering her own edges. Lorenzo smiled, slow and genuine. I can work with that. He kissed her then, deep and unhurried. No audience to perform for, no strategic purpose behind it. Just two people exploring possibility, giving themselves permission to feel without analyzing whether they should. When they finally separated, both breathless, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight. Not for anything beyond this. Just stay. Sleep in my guest room if you want. I don't want you to leave yet. Elena stayed. They talked until nearly dawn, sharing histories and dreams and fears that had nothing to do with Marcus or weddings or transformation. Lorenzo told her about business ventures that had failed, about relationships that had ended badly, about the pressure of living up to his family's legacy while trying to create his own path. Elena shared her deepest insecurities about her art, about whether she'd ever be good enough, about the fear that she'd wasted her 20s on someone who'd never valued her. As pale light began filtering through the windows, Lorenzo walked her to the guest room, kissed her goodnight with careful restraint, and left her alone to sleep. Elena settled into sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, surrounded by luxury that was becoming familiar, and felt something close to contentment. The next weeks unfolded with surprising naturalness. Lorenzo gave her space to figure herself out while making it clear he was available whenever she wanted company. They had dinner twice a week, casual and comfortable, no pressure or expectations. He attended the meeting with Michaela Chen, sitting quietly while Elena showed her paintings, providing silent support without overwhelming the interaction. Michaela loved her work, wanted to include 3 pieces in an upcoming group show featuring emerging artists, offered representation if Elena was interested in pursuing art more seriously. Elena said yes before fear could make her say no, and walked out of the gallery with Lorenzo's hand in hers, feeling like she'd just stepped through another doorway into another version of her future. I'm proud of you, Lorenzo said as they walked through the city, no destination in mind. That took courage. I'm terrified, Elena admitted. What if no one likes my work? What if the show is a disaster? Then you learn and create more. But Elena, Lorenzo stopped walking, turned to face her on the crowded sidewalk. Stop catastrophizing. Stop assuming the worst. You're talented. Your work is powerful. Let yourself succeed for once instead of planning for failure. Elena kissed him right there on the street, not caring who saw, not performing for anyone, just expressing the gratitude and affection and growing love she felt for this man who'd seen her when she was invisible and refused to let her hide again. The gallery show opened 6 weeks after the wedding. Elena's 3 paintings hung in a prestigious space alongside work from other emerging artists, each piece representing a different stage of her transformation. The woman in the doorway, stepping into the storm. The city as she saw it from Lorenzo's windows, dark and romantic and full of secrets. An abstract piece that somehow captured the feeling of shedding skin, of becoming. The opening was crowded with people Elena didn't know, critics and collectors and art enthusiasts moving through the space with practiced assessment. Lorenzo stood beside her, proud and supportive, introducing her to people with influence while making it clear she was an artist in her own right, not just his girlfriend. Your work is extraordinary, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes told Elena. Raw and honest without being self-indulgent. I'd like to discuss a potential solo show next spring. Elena agreed, exchanged information, moved through the evening in a haze of possibility. 2 of her 3 paintings sold before the night ended. Michaela was ecstatic. Lorenzo was unsurprised. I told you, he said as they left the gallery, Elena's hand tucked in his. You just needed to let people see what was always there. They walked through the city Elena had lived in for years but was only now really seeing, the architectural details she'd never noticed, the small moments of beauty hidden in plain sight, the endless potential of a place she'd previously viewed as a prison of limited options. I saw Marcus yesterday, Elena said suddenly, at a coffee shop near my apartment. He was alone. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but she felt him tense slightly. Did you talk to him? He tried. Asked if we could catch up, said he wanted to explain some things, make sure I understood his perspective. Elena smiled at the memory. I told him there was nothing to explain, that I understood perfectly and had moved on with my life. Then I left before he could respond. How did that feel? Powerful, like closing a door I didn't even realize was still cracked open. He looked. Elena paused, searching for the right word. Small, not physically, just diminished somehow, like he'd shrunk to fit the small life he'd chosen. And Vivian? Apparently pregnant already. Marcus mentioned it like an achievement, like he'd won some race I didn't know we were running. Elena laughed softly. I felt sorry for him, sorry for both of them. They're building a life based on strategy and status instead of genuine connection. It's going to be exhausting. They reached Elena's apartment. She'd kept it despite Lorenzo's subtle hints that she could move somewhere nicer, wanting to maintain her independence, to prove she could support herself even while accepting his help. Lorenzo walked her to her door, a ritual that had become routine over the past weeks. I love you, he said suddenly, the words surprising them both. I didn't plan to say that tonight. Didn't plan to say it at all until I was sure you were ready to hear it. But I do. I love you, Elena. Not the version of you I helped create, the version that was always there, waiting to be seen. Elena felt tears spill over, didn't bother wiping them away. I love you too. And that terrifies me because I'm still figuring out who I am, still learning to stand alone, and I don't want to lose myself in another relationship. Then don't. Lorenzo cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away tears. Love me while loving yourself. Build your career while building our relationship. Be independent while being part of something. It's not either or, Elena. It's both. You can be whole on your own and still choose to share that wholeness with someone else. She kissed him, tasting salt and promise, and the future they were building together. When they separated, both knew something had shifted, some final barrier dissolved. Stay with me tonight, Elena said. Not in the guest room. With me. Lorenzo searched her face, making sure she was certain. Whatever he saw there satisfied him, because he nodded, followed her inside, let her lead him to her bedroom where they made love slowly, tenderly, without performance or strategy. Just 2 people choosing each other, again and again in the quiet darkness. Months passed. Elena's art career grew steadily, Not overnight success, but sustainable progress. Her solo show in the spring was critically acclaimed, several pieces purchased by serious collectors. She quit the diner, able finally to support herself through her art while maintaining the independence she'd fought so hard to reclaim. Lorenzo continued his work, using his resources to help people like Elena, the overlooked, the underestimated, those convinced their worth was determined by others' assessment. They were partners now in ways that went beyond romance, collaborating on projects that gave people second chances, funded education for those who couldn't afford it, created opportunities where none had existed. Natalia recovered slowly but steadily, eventually returning to work at the family foundation, using her experience to help other women escaping destructive relationships. She and Elena became close friends, bonded by their shared understanding of what it meant to rebuild yourself after someone tried to destroy you. One afternoon, nearly a year after the wedding, Elena stood in front of her favorite painting at the public gallery. Threshold still hung in the same place, the woman forever frozen in her moment of decision. "She's stepping forward," Lorenzo said from beside her. He'd found her here, knowing without asking where she'd be. "In case you were wondering, I can see it now, she was always stepping forward." "I know," Elena smiled, leaning into his warmth. "I finally understand what the artist was saying. It's not about the decision itself. It's about the moment after you've decided but before you've moved. That split second of knowing everything is about to change and choosing to let it." "Do you ever regret it, stepping through your own threshold?" Elena thought about the question honestly, thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken, invisible, convinced she was worth only what others decided to give her. Thought about everything that had happened since, the transformation, the confrontation, the slow, painful growth into someone who knew her own value. "Not even for a second," she said finally. "Everything I lost was making me smaller. Everything I gained has made me more myself." Lorenzo pulled her closer, kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad I walked into that diner." "So am I." They stood together in front of the painting, two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of heartbreak and built something real from the wreckage. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from Michaela about another potential show, from Sarah wanting to grab dinner, from her mother saying she was proud of her latest piece. Life continued, complex and messy and beautiful in ways Elena had never imagined when she was making herself small to fit into Marcus's carefully constructed world. She was an artist now, not just someone who used to paint. She was Lorenzo's partner, not his project. She was Elena Carter, complete and whole, and still discovering new edges of herself with every passing day. Somewhere across the city, Marcus lived his life with Vivian and their infant daughter, probably never understanding what he'd lost when he chose status over substance. Elena had heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd tried to contact Lorenzo a few months after the wedding, wanting to discuss some business opportunity. Lorenzo had declined without explanation, cutting off that bridge completely. Elena had felt nothing when she heard. No satisfaction, no vindication, just profound indifference. Marcus was part of her past, a chapter that had taught her what she didn't want, who she didn't want to be. Closure didn't come from final conversations or explanations. It came from moving forward so completely that looking back held no appeal. "Ready to go?" Lorenzo asked, checking his watch. "Natalia's expecting us for dinner." Elena took one last look at the painting, at the woman in the doorway who'd meant so much to her for so long. She didn't need it anymore, didn't need the reminder to be brave. She was living it now, every day, choosing to step into storms because she'd learned she was strong enough to weather them. "Ready," she said, and let Lorenzo lead her out of the gallery into the golden afternoon light. They walked hand in hand through the city, just two people among millions, building a life that didn't require validation from anyone else. Elena's art continued to grow, her reputation building slowly but surely. Lorenzo's work expanded, helping more people reclaim their power. Together, they created something neither had expected, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine love, not need or performance or filling empty spaces. Sometimes Elena thought about the woman she'd been, crying in a diner at midnight, convinced she was broken beyond repair. She wanted to go back and tell her younger self that the heartbreak was a gift, that losing Marcus was actually finding herself, that the storm she was about to walk into would teach her exactly how strong she'd always been. But she didn't need to, because she was living in proof now, standing on the other side of transformation, That sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the door opening to your real life. The wedding invitation still existed somewhere, probably in a box of old papers Elena would eventually throw away. But it no longer mattered. The day Marcus married Vivienne wasn't the day Elena proved she'd moved on. It was just one step in a much longer journey toward becoming someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Elena Carter had stepped through her threshold. She'd walked into the storm, and she'd emerged on the other side not unscathed, not unchanged, but undeniably, powerfully, beautifully herself. Years from now, people would ask Lorenzo when he knew Elena was the one. He'd tell them about seeing her in a diner, recognizing the specific pain of being underestimated, watching her transform not into someone new, but into who she'd always been beneath the layers of self-doubt. People would ask Elena when she knew Lorenzo was different from Marcus, when she understood this love was real. She'd tell them about the moment he kissed her in a hallway, and she felt no fear, no uncertainty, just the quiet certainty that this man saw her completely and loved her anyway. But the real answer, the one neither would say out loud, was simpler. They knew because they'd chosen each other again and again, in small moments and large ones, in the easy times and the difficult ones. They knew because their love wasn't built on need or rescue or filling voids, but on genuine appreciation for who the other person was and who they were becoming. Elena's art hung in galleries now, her name recognized in certain circles, her talent finally visible to the world. Lorenzo continued building his empire with integrity, using power to elevate rather than dominate, creating opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Together, they built a foundation that helped people reclaim their stories, that funded art programs and education, and second chances for those who'd been dismissed as not worth the investment. And on quiet evenings, when the city lights glittered beyond their windows and the day's work was finished, they'd sit together and remember how it all started. A diner at midnight, a mysterious stranger, a broken woman who didn't know she was actually whole. That woman was gone now, transformed not by clothes or makeup or walking into a wedding on someone's arm, but by the slow, painful, necessary work of excavating herself from beneath years of learned invisibility. Elena Carter had stepped through her threshold. She'd become inevitable, powerful, exactly who she was always meant to be. And she'd done it not by proving Marcus wrong, but by proving herself right. The story that began with heartbreak ended with wholeness. The woman who'd been discarded discovered she was actually invaluable. The man who'd saved her learned he was really just helping her save herself. And the wedding that was supposed to break her became instead the catalyst for her complete, devastating, absolutely necessary transformation. Elena stood at the window of Lorenzo's penthouse, their penthouse now, watching the city pulse with life below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was living his small, strategic life. Somewhere out there, people were heartbroken and invisible and convinced they were broken. But here, in this moment, Elena was whole. She was seen. She was loved for exactly who she was. And that, she realized, was the best revenge of all. Not making Marcus regret losing her, but becoming someone so complete, so powerful, so undeniably herself that his loss became completely irrelevant. Elena Carter had reclaimed her story. And this time, she was writing it herself.